Welcome to another episode of the Dope Student Podcast.
Welcome back to the Dome Student Podcast. We're here to bring the best insights and inspiration from some of the dopest professionals in their fields. I'm Nani, your curious and ready to learn host.
And I'm Clea, here to ask you big questions and keep it real for all our student listeners.
And I'm Millie, always looking for those gems of advice to help you explore your career dreams. Together, we're all about connecting you with stories that matter.
Today we have an exciting guest joining us, Rasheed Zaire Ajamu, your journalist, editor, and storyteller dedicated to shining a light on underrepresented communities. Rasheed, welcome to the Dope Student Podcast.
Hi, y'all. Nice to be here.
Can you share your journey from being an organizer in Philadelphia to becoming an editor for the Germantown Info Hub? What inspired that transition?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for letting me be here, y'all. Good to be in conversation. So, I got out of college in, 2018? And so I was a community development coordinator at a CDC over in South Kensington. And that, it was interesting. So I was, helping people, of course, pretty much with, housing, getting them the resources and stuff like that they needed. And, connecting people with different resources felt like a good thing. But I felt like I always wanted more. And so I actually went to school for communications. I went to LaSalle University. Shout out to LaSalle. And yeah, when I went to LaSalle University, I was already a communications major. So I was putting a little bit of what I learned into praxis, but not the full thing, right? So, yeah, after that, the pandemic pretty much hit, and so I was already an organizer doing things with, different organizations, helping out on, the front lines with different things. So when the pandemic hit, I'm actually a person who's immunocompromised, so I couldn't be out in the streets, or else, COVID could have, really taken me out. So I had to pivot. So I went to doing a lot of, online justice work and, a lot of, connecting people with resources online. Yeah. After that, I did that for a few years. That was really lucrative. I mean, connected people with thousands of dollars via mutual aid. And then, I got an opportunity to be interviewed by the Germantown Info Hub, which is where I work at. And maybe a month later, they were like, hey, we want to know if you can actually host this radio show for us. And we were like, I was like, I ain't really do that. I don't really do hosting radios, but I also needed money, so we hosted a radio show. And then after maybe a few months of doing that, I was also doing some reported pieces on the side. Again, I had a background in journalism, just did not actually take it up. And then I ended up being a journalist not too long after that. And 2 years later, I pretty much ascended into the editor role after pretty much doing the reporting and pretty much helping to man the ship at the Germantown Info Hub. So, yeah, it's, writing is something I always like to do. It's just not something that I always felt emboldened and empowered to do because I couldn't do it in the ways I wanted to. So being able to write about my neighborhood, reflect on things that I remember growing up and being able to relate them to new things and concepts has really brought me a lot of joy. So, it's the work itself that, continues to inspire me every day.
What do you love most about documenting stories, especially those from underrepresented communities? Do you have a favorite story you've worked on?
I have a lot of favorite stories that I worked on, and they pretty much serve as an example of what it is the first part of the question was. So actually the other day I did a story on this thing called the Tin Man in Germantown. So the Tin Man is exactly how you would imagine it. If you've ever seen Wizard of Oz or anything of the sort, it's literally a Tin Man, and it sat outside of this hardware store for 80 years in my neighborhood. Randomly a few years ago, that Tin Man went missing, and it was a relic that a lot of people who, if you're born and raised and actually have roots in the neighborhood, you understand, the significance of it. It's not a thing that, was really intentionally put there to do anything, but of course, after a while, things become relics. They become symbols of, hope and community, right? And that was one of those things for us in the Germantown community. So there was a business owner who, actually restored the Tin Man, even though it had been lost for a few years. She got a whole new statue made. And she got it put up. And so those kinds of things are the things that I really enjoy about being able to bring what we call underrepresented stories to the surface. right? Because there are things inside of neighborhoods, specifically my neighborhood, that like wider papers like the Inquirer or Billy Penn can't necessarily cover because they don't have those connections with neighbors. They don't have that like wherewithal and that know-how to get around the neighborhood and like what the actual important symbols of my neighborhood are. So yeah, like those kinds of stories where I'm able to, because I was there, because I know what it is I'm talking about, and I have like a deep knowledge that other like reporters in other places don't have, that keeps me going, and that like really keeps me inspired to keep doing what I'm doing, to keep like, yeah, connecting past history and present to inform the future.
You mentioned that success is how you define it. How do you personally define success in your career, and how can students apply this idea to their own lives?
I love that idea. Success, when I say success is how you define it, I feel like I grew up in a time, and I don't know how this is for y'all now, but when I grew up, so I went to school from from the years of like 20, like grade school from like 2000 to 2014. In those years, it was very imperative. They were like pushing on the kids, like, go to college, go to college, go to college. That's the only way that you're like going to get further, right? But that's also because people, adults at that time, had like carved out in their minds what it is they wanted for children. And like the big thing was college, because college had become more accessible for people to obtain. And like people who look like me, like black folks, brown folks, weren't always able to have that opportunity to go to college. And so for the generation above me felt important. And so when I say like success is how you define it, it's very much not necessarily going against the wishes of like your parents or anything of the sort, but it's also understanding that you set a path for yourself, and at the end of the day, like, you are going to have to guide yourself through whatever path it is you have, and like other folks can't be there to take that path for you. So if you're going to do something, you need to make sure that you're doing it for you and nobody else, and also don't let people define what successes you have, or what accolades you get. Define like the field that you're in, right? Because it doesn't. Like, for me, I'm a journalist. For somebody who's a journalist who's not me, they might say their overall mission as a journalist is to get that Pulitzer Prize. For me, a Pulitzer isn't actually important. Like, being able to connect with my neighbors, being able to connect with, folks like yourselves is like what's important to me. Like, being able to just connect different things and people and ideas is what like really like feels like success to me. So as long as I'm doing my job as a storyteller and a griot, I am fulfilled, making sure that certain stories and certain things never die.
Being an editor gives you the power to shape how Germantown is represented. How do you approach this responsibility, and why is it important to you?
As an editor, yes, I do. I shape the stories. I would never say that I shape like the narrative of the neighborhood, because I actually rely, of course, on the words of the folks who we are putting in stories to create their own stories. So I see the role of an editor as just fact-checking and making sure that things align, making sure that things make sense, making sure that structures and styles of stories make sense, but never to like flip anything or frame anything a way that I need it to be framed. Because stories are important and they're actually very valuable to people. And the smallest bit of framing, like somebody else's story, can like make things tense, make people not trust you. And so it's always my job to ensure that like folks actually feel represented and feel like their stories are exactly how they intend them to be. So yeah.
What were some of the biggest challenges you faced while growing in your career, and how did you overcome them?
I would say the biggest obstacle overall was that I actually just didn't like journalism when I was in school. It wasn't for me. And so that kept me a long time from actually honing my craft. And so when I came across this job to be a reporter, essentially, like, originally, I was like learning with it. So like this thing has actually learned and grown with me the same way that I'm learning and growing with it. So I literally did not start doing journalism as a full-time career until I started this job 4 years ago. So yeah, I'm still learning, I'm still growing, and so that is part of the hardship, is that I let something or a curriculum telling me how something should be get in the way of what it could have been. And so I didn't actually take the time or use my time wisely to try to like actually do more with it. So I'm actually still learning. I'm still growing, and I mean, there's still a beauty in that. And I feel like I'm still just teachable overall. And yeah.
You've received accolades like 76 most influencer people in Philly and Aldea's 4 under 4. How do you stay grounded and focused while achieving such recognition?
I stay grounded and focused by focusing on myself. Shout out to the awards, shout out to the accolades, but I understand that those things don't define me. It goes back into my same thing about like you define what success is. Those things 100% they feel good when you get them. It doesn't mean that like I don't smile when I get them, but it also doesn't mean that I let that be like my glass ceiling. There is actually no glass ceiling for me. My intern actually just asked me the other day, when do I feel like I reached my peak? I laugh because like I'm not in my peak. I have not peaked yet. I'm actually in my prime. I'm still going. I'm only 28 years old, and so like I have a long way to go before this train slows down. So I never let any single thing or accolade allow me to get on a high horse. Like I'm always off the horse. So yeah. So I mean, just focusing on my people and understanding that the folks who I am serving, who I'm reporting on, are the priority. They're the prize, not these accolades and these like recognitions and accomplishments.
Grit and dependability are key qualities you've emphasized. How can students develop these traits in their academic and personal lives?
Grit and dependability, those are very important to me. And I say that I feel like the ways that y'all can utilize that is just by simply aligning and understanding what your values are, what it is y'all want to do, and then sticking to those things. So if you say that you want to do something, if you say you want that A, you need to assess like what it is you are doing to get that A. You need to like take a look at what it is you are doing and say to yourself like, oh, like I've been doing this and this clearly has not been working for me, and therefore I need to make sure that I pivot and do this. And the more that you are self-aware, the more other people understand that like you know what it is you're doing, you know how it is like you work and you perceive yourself, and you can only become more dependable because you are meeting all your goals, you're meeting all your expectations. The more that you like self-reflect, and the more you pivot when you do that, right? So grit and dependability is about making sure that like you get a thing done, and that you're also getting a thing done when it's supposed to be done, right? And that people understand and know that. So yeah, like applying yourself, self-reflecting, and always making sure that you're flexible and pivoting is how like y'all can 100% adapt that into your everyday at school.
And what advice would you give to a student who's passionate about storytelling but unsure if journalism is the right path for them?
Storytelling is not just one profession, right? I would tell them that storytelling is done in a plethora of ways. Storytelling is done through music, rappers, poetry. It's done through movies, films. It's done through YouTube's, your content creations that you see on like TikTok, all of that. Storytelling doesn't have to exist in a bubble. It doesn't have to exist under somebody telling you or editing you either. Storytelling exists how you want it to. It can also exist within just the conversations that you have. Like, I'm a person, shout out to high school. I used to love to gossip in high school. I was a storyteller, what can I say? Other people didn't perceive it that way, but that's what it was for me. It was entertainment, right? So yeah, like step into your storytelling abilities how you want to and what's comfortable for you. And again, don't let people put you in a bubble and tell you you have to do it a certain way.
You've mentioned that exposure to the real world experience helps students figure out what they enjoy and don't enjoy. Can you give us an example from your own journey?
I'm not sure. I didn't really experience a lot of different things growing up because, again, I grew up like poor and like very unprivileged. So I don't think I was really exposed to like otherworldly things, but I can say that like I used to work with kids and I used to work with different students of all different ages. And so I know that working in those different programs or those different classrooms and being able to get them out the classroom and like take them different places so they could see different people, even like a class like this with y'all, right? Like y'all being able to talk to people and like actually ask them questions up front. We were never able to do that in our classes, right? We didn't have those like privileges. We didn't have these kinds of setups. I mean, podcasts weren't even a thing. So it's like things like these for real, these experiences that y'all are experiencing right now, like having a class in someone like Mr. Evan Jarrett's class where he's teaching y'all a trade and a thing that like you wouldn't learn in other classrooms, right? So being able to say, like we pick up textbooks all day, but now I'm in this class and I'm actually using my hands. Do I actually want to go to college to do a certain thing, or do I want to just go to straight to trade school, right? That's exactly what I mean. Like, the experience y'all are actually having every single day in this class is exactly what I'm talking about.
You're only 28 and have already achieved so much. What's next for you, and how do you continue setting and reaching new goals?
Ooh, I don't know what's next for me. I'm building an archive in my neighborhood. So I want to focus on that a little bit more. And yeah, for right now, that's it. I'm just building an archive. Again, a different form of storytelling, a different form of collecting stories and preserving stories. I want to ensure that, like, my folks in Germantown feel that they are taken care of and that they are nourished through our storytelling. But for myself, I'm actually not a goal setter. I'm a person who, like, things just happen. I'm just in the right place at the right time where something hits me when it does, and then I go for it. But I just want to stay at the top of my game for now. I just want to continue to hone my skills. I want to continue to perfect my craft and do the best that I can.
You've been a cook for 6 years and are also a wrestling fan. How do these interests connect to your work if at all? What lessons have they taught you?
Just a few moments ago, I said that storytelling can exist in many different ways. And so for me, the storytelling comes through, like, on wrestling, because there are, like, storylines, right? Those stories are crafted. Those stories are crafted. Those matches are, like, based around different stories that are told, on screen through actors and acting. Same thing with cooking. Cooking is generational, so, like, different recipes are passed down from generation to generation. I learned everything that I learned in the kitchen from my grandmother, so, like, every time I cook, I feel like it's a different story that, like, she has, like, taught me. So I mean, that's how I carry it forward as well. Like, I gain inspiration from all the different things that I enjoy and all the different spaces that I'm in, and I carry that into my work one way or another.
Finally, for students who want to be writers, editors, or storytellers, what are 3 essential skills they should focus on building right now?
3 essential skills you should focus on is self-awareness, reflection, and actually just writing. Just taking the time to write. When you think about something, write it down. When you want to speak to somebody, you have things you want to say, write it down. You got goals you want to set, write them down. The more you write, the more muscle that you build in it. So, yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for having me, y'all.
You're welcome.